Welcome back inside the Hall of Fame, guys. Told you we had a special guest, journalist, MMA journalist, Ariel Helwani. Welcome to the show. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling great, guys. Thank you for having me back. It's great to be here with you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. We definitely are coming off of a huge, pay-per-view. UFC 251 just went down from Yas Island. Man, you were there, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. I'm here in America. None of us went from like the ESPN team, but obviously been watching it from this room. I haven't gone to any of the events thus far. We aren't traveling yet, but hopefully soon we'll get to go back on the road.
Man, that's got to be taxing, just not to be in the action and looking at it from afar like that, especially this last pay-per-view. It has so many different dynamics as far as, referees, judges, the fighters. Give me your take on UFC 251.
I mean, obviously, it was a great main card on paper. I thought the night started maybe a little slow with the prelims. There were a lot of prelims, and some of them weren't great. But I kind of knew that. If you looked at the prelims on paper, there weren't a lot of big names. They had to get a lot of these international fighters fights because obviously they couldn't fight in America. That's the main reason why they had to do the whole Yas Island thing, and why they're doing 4 events there. So I kind of knew that the prelims wouldn't be maybe as good as some of the other prelims we've seen as of late. Also, I was curious to see if maybe we'd see a little less action because they were fighting in the bigger cage for this event. And for the last 2 months, we were spoiled with the smaller cage events. But then once the main card started, I mean, Amanda Ribas with a great win over Paige Zandt, a fairly one-sided victory for her. And I think she's a star in the making. The Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade fight, in my opinion, was the best fight of the night. I'm a really big fan of Rose, especially when she is on point. I think she has some of the best striking in MMA, and I think she's one of the most exciting fighters to watch. And I know some people be like, well, she's not really a knockout artist or, a lethal finisher, but I just love watching her box and kickbox. On her feet, she is just amazing, and she's great off her back. She's great with her jiu-jitsu as well. So I love that fight. Petr Yan, to me, is probably going to hold that belt for a long time. I think that he is another force to be reckoned with, just the second Russian-born champion in UFC history. The Volkanovski-Holloway fight was close and fun, and ultimately Volkanovski won. I thought Holloway, in my opinion, won the fight 3-2. And then, of course, the main event, to some people, didn't live up to the hype. I had no problem with it. I think Usman's getting unfair criticism. At the end of the day, as you guys know, it's all about that W. It's all about winning. And you got to keep that streak going. And he did that. And maybe people won't buy his next pay-per-view, but on that night he had to win, and he did what he had to do.
Well, I mean, that's what winners do. That's what champions do. They don't think about how they're going to go out there and get the W. They just think about, let's get this W and move on to the next one. Let's talk about Paige Van Zandt for a second. Paige was coming in off of, she definitely been banged up since coming into the UFC, and then this perhaps her last fight in the UFC, going out on a note like that. What do you think's next for Paige Van Zandt?
I don't think her future is in the UFC. Her husband, Austin Vanderford, fights for Bellator. He's undefeated. He's a really good fighter. I thought the UFC should have signed him. He fought for the Contender Series show, Dana White's Contender Series, won, and they didn't give him a contract. And I kind of feel like that was the beginning of the end of the Paige Van Zandt relationship with the UFC. Of course, she had to fight out her deal. But with her losing the way in which she did, and maybe some comments that she made recently about her pay or lack thereof, I think the UFC will allow her to go out and test the market. Now, it's going to be interesting. Did she hurt her stock by losing like that? Will Bellator still be interested in her? Will another organization still be interested in her? I think they should be interested in her because she's only 26. She was out for almost 2 years, multiple arm surgeries. I still think she has a high ceiling. Sometimes people like to knock Paige for just being, an Instagram model or anything like that. She's a tough fighter. She's a tough woman, and she fought a really tough Amanda Ribas. There's a reason why Amanda Ribas was the largest favorite on the card from a betting perspective. It's because she's really, really good. So why wouldn't Bellator, who could use a few recognizable names, sign her, get her a win or two, and then have her fight their champion, Alima McFarlane, who's phenomenal, but just doesn't have a lot of competition right now, 125. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I suspect, my hunch is she'll go elsewhere. And if I had to bet right now, I think that Bellator is probably the best spot for her.
I think with Paige going to Bellator, it's kind of like, Cam Newton, getting signed. I mean, she's going to have to prove herself. It's kind of like CM Punk trying to get back into wrestling. We don't really know what this guy's been after being away from the game for so long. I think he's going to have to prove himself. I think Paige is in that same spot where she's going to have to go out there and, get a few wins before anybody going to want to pay her a whole lot of money or anything like that.
Wait a second. Did you just break some news? Is CM Punk coming back to wrestling?
Well, my thing is, it's a lot of talk right now with AEW as far as CM Punk perhaps trying to get back in the game. We were talking about how much, money he was asking from AEW to actually come there. Right now, his name is floating around the water cooler. Let's just say that. And hopefully he'll get back in the game. But me personally, I say, man, we don't know what CM Punk got left in the tank. We don't know what the legs are like. We don't know what the condition is like. We don't know if he still got that drawing power. So
Right.
he's definitely going to have to go back out there and, perhaps get on one of these shows. I don't know if it's ROH. I don't know if it's go to Japan, but he's going to have to prove if he still has, that star power in professional wrestling. Me personally, I don't know. What do you think?
I think he does. Wrestling fans are very forgiving and they like a good comeback, right? And imagine if they can, introduce him with that song, that cult of personality, that thing hits, people would go crazy. Of course, no one will be in attendance when it hits these days, but I think at home they would go crazy. And I think he's a recognizable name to WWE fans and also, of course, to AEW fans. So if AEW can sign him, I think that would be a huge coup. And I also think he would be a shot in the arm for the WWE audience as well. As I just think he is such a great talker on the mic, and obviously he's a great pro wrestler. He's older now, but believe it or not, I actually think he got some street cred for what he did in UFC. I know it didn't go his way, but I think that he proved if you only fought once and lost the way he did and never came back, I think people kind of would have laughed at him. But honestly, the fact that he came back 2 years later after how that went the first time and went through a training camp and did everything that he did, and it didn't go his way, fair play to Michael Jackson. To me, I think he earned everyone's respect. It wasn't just a one-off. It wasn't about just a one and done. It wasn't a money grab. He truly wanted to be good at it. And I never understood the criticism that he received because it wasn't like he said, I'm going to the UFC or nowhere. It was the UFC who came calling to him and offered him the big money. And why wouldn't you take that money, right? And I don't think he took anyone's slot. Like the whole CM Punk and UFC experience to me was way overblown and people got way too upset about it. And I don't think he lost any credibility doing that. So I think he would be a huge coup for any wrestling organization. I didn't know this. I didn't know I'm not as into the wrestling news these days as I am the MMA news, only because there's just so much going on in the world of mixed martial arts. But I would love to see him come back, even if it's for like a short run.
Well, I mean, when I look at CM Punk's UFC, what I call it is the experiment. You know what I mean? It worked out for everybody. You know what I mean? We got huge ratings. CM Punk got a big check. At the end of the day, nobody got hurt. So everybody wins as far as I'm concerned. Let's talk about Peter Yan, Jose Aldo. That fight, it was what it was. The world got a chance to see it. Jose Aldo, he looked good. He looked perhaps as best he's going to look at 33 years old. Okay. Yeah. But everybody saw that fight pretty much, going, towards, going over the edge there as far as, perhaps the referee should stop it or maybe the corner should stop it or something should happen. What do you think about the way that fight ended and should the referee had stopped that fight a little bit earlier?
Absolutely. Leon Roberts, who was the referee that night, is typically a good referee. And I understand what he was doing. Jose Aldo, there's a lot of respect. He's one of the greatest fighters to ever compete in the octagon, greatest fighters in WEC history. He put that featherweight division on the map. He's the greatest featherweight champion, certainly the most decorated featherweight champion of all time. That fight should have probably ended 2 to 2.5 minutes earlier. But when you see a fighter, especially of his stature, in that position, turtling up like that, not wanting to tap due to strikes, and he probably wanted out at that point, but there's such a negative stigma attached to tapping due to strikes. When GSP did it against Matt Serra many moons ago at UFC 69, he was ridiculed for it, and I don't think that's fair, but that's just me. So anyway, he's turtling up, and because there's no one there, there's no audience, you could really hear it at home. Those punches were hitting. And it's just like, what was the point of this? He's not getting out. He's not intelligently defending himself. He's literally just trying to hang on for dear life, surviving as well as he could. And Jan is just teeing off on him, blasting him with repeated shots. What was the point? And so I'm trying not to be too hard on Leon Roberts, but if I'm being honest, that should have been stopped 2.5 or 3 minutes prior. And I know that refereeing is a thankless job, and I know they don't get paid much, and I know it's very subjective because there's no clear-cut rules as to when you should step in for a TKO. I get all of that, but the whole world was watching that and thinking the same thing. Could you please stop this? Because here's a legend getting beat up, and there's no way he's going to turn the tide. And so it's unfortunate. You say he's 33. I think a lot of people don't even know that because he's been around for so long. 33 isn't that old, but he's been around for so long, and there's so much wear and tear on those tires that I don't know if he'll get another title shot, and he has nothing to be ashamed of. It was a great run for him. I'm not suggesting, by the way, that he should retire. I just think the Jans of the world, this is their time, and we saw that on display Saturday.
It's a young man's game. I always say a referee has to have, one thing. Brad, go ahead and tell him what that is. Go ahead and tell him.
The wherewithal, understanding, and know how to step in and just stop it, right? but you bring up something, though, Ariel, because I saw your interview with Alexander Volkanovski yesterday, and there was a lot made of the judging of that title fight with Max Holloway. I had Max Holloway winning the first 3 rounds, like I think most people did who I've been talking to. And Booker and I spoke on the show Monday about the judging in MMA. How can we fix the 10-9 must system? What can we do for MMA? I think I've even heard you float the idea of open round scoring and something similar to that. What would be your suggestion to fix that issue?
Well, my true suggestion is to completely change the system, but I think that's too radical because I don't feel like the scoring system in place for mixed martial arts is the right one. It's a boxing scoring system. The 10-point must system is tailor-made for pro boxing. If you actually read the rules on how to judge an MMA fight, it's so subjective. It's so vague. I would be confused if I was paid to do this. I would be nervous if I was paid to do this because it leaves a lot to interpretation as to what is clearly a 10-9, a 10-8, and the 10-7 is a unicorn. But in boxing, you score a knockdown, we're talking about a 10-8. We know that's a clear-cut 10-8. Now, the guy could come back, or it could be even a 10-7 with multiple knockdowns, etc. Here in our sport, you could get 3 knockdowns in a round, and it's not even a 10-8, right? So it's very hard to really know what you're – and that's why sometimes, I'll watch a fight, and I'll be like, oh, I think this guy won, but I'm trying to think about how the judges have been scoring fights throughout the entire night, so I'll actually change my pick just to try to guess if I'm getting it right or not. I think open scoring would help only because the fighters will know where they stand, right? Like going into that 5th round, maybe to your point, Max thought he was up 3-0, right? And so he thought, all right, last 2 rounds, even if I lose these, I'm good. Well, if it was open scoring, he would have known it was 2-2. So maybe he would have been a little more aggressive because some people thought he took his foot off the gas in the last couple of rounds. I don't know, but I just like the transparency. It's the only sport in the world, combat sports that is, that you don't know where you stand going into the final minutes of a contest. And that to me is a little funky. And I don't subscribe, by the way, to the notion that a fighter will coast if he knows he's up. I think that you're in an enclosed area, someone's coming after you, like you're going to fight. The same reason why when a football team is up in the early portion of the 4th quarter, they're not just, and you could alter the rules to discourage that. Like in Pride back in the day, they would give yellow cards if you're stalling and things like that. You can deduct points. In any event, I just think the 10-point must system is not good for MMA, and we will continue to see these issues back where you guys are in February in Houston. Dominic Reyes, just ask him. He got screwed by the 10-point must system. Just ask Yoel Romero. A lot of people thought he got screwed against Israel Adesanya. Ask Joanna Jędrzejczyk, same card. So this is going to happen from now until the end of time if we don't change the system. But it's another problem, guys? Another problem is there's no national commission. I have long believed that there should be a national combat sports commission, not Florida, Nevada, California, New York, because guess what? They all have egos. They all have agendas. They're all using different rules. So they can't even get on the same page as far as the rules are concerned. That's why I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But these are some of the things that I would love to see happen one day.
Brad and I was talking about this just last week, and we were talking about the 10-point must system. We were talking about the judges. And my suggestion was, do you think former fighters could determine the 10-point must system a little bit better than a lot of judges we have now, just because we were talking about Harold Letterman, who is a famed judge, been around for years, and then all of a sudden his daughter became a judge, Julie Letterman. And I say, wait a minute, Julie, she's never been in a fight. She's been nowhere near combat experience. What gives her, the knowledge to actually judge a combat fight? I'm confused.
Well, first of all, Howard Letterman, legend. I love that guy. Every time Jim
Definitely.
Lampley would throw it to him, let's send it over to Harold Letterman for his scorecard. Okay, Jim, 30-27, Oscar De La Hoya. I got to tell you, Jim, I always loved imitating him. He was a legend. In any event, yeah, I get what you're saying, but, I also feel like you don't necessarily, look, it would be nice if former fighters did it, but I think at that point, there's two issues. Number one, a lot of fighters are banged up and then they just don't want to go through, the whole rigmarole of trying to get, proper testing and then passing courses and whatnot to become a judge. Number two, they don't get paid. And that's part of the problem. They don't get paid very much. Like, is it really worth their time on the weekend to go traveling all around the world when you're not really getting paid all that much? And there's another issue too. A lot of fighters, whether we want to admit it or not, have conflicts of interest, right? You trained with this guy, or this guy was your enemy, or you fought this guy who was a training partner of this guy. So that's going to create some problems too. So I don't necessarily have an issue with the people who they are choosing per se. What I don't like is, for example, not to rag on the great state of Texas, but when you come to Texas once a year, that doesn't mean the local guy that you're friends with gets a shot at the big time. But to me, again, if there was a national commission, there would be a pool of referees and judges who are assigned by that national commission, who are the creme de la creme, the very best. And when the UFC comes to town, those guys get those gigs. And when Bellator comes to town, X amount of guys get those gigs. And when it's a lower event, you build them up. There needs to be a process. But here, what happens? Oh, the UFC comes to South Dakota, and all of a sudden it's, open season for the guy who runs a karate dojo at a strip mall in South Dakota to start judging or refereeing a major UFC event. It makes no sense. It's complete lunacy. So, there's a lot of issues there. And it's interesting. People were ragging on some of the decisions and the calls on Saturday. But, guess what? The UFC hired those judges and referees because when they're overseas, they're acting as the commission. So sometimes the UFC likes to say, hey, it's not on us. It's up to the government. They assign everyone. Well, in this case, it is on them because they're acting as the government when there's no commission like in Abu Dhabi.
Definitely. We saw a great main event there again, Usman Masvidal. And still a big fan of Jorge Masvidal. I mean, we've had him on the show, and he's very colorful, very entertaining guy. That's what people like about Jorge Masvidal. I always say you can be good at what you do, and people will love you forever. You can be great at what you do. If people don't like you, you won't stick around very long. That's the quality I think Masvidal brings to the table. But I questioned him going into this fight with Usman just because the fight with Teal. I didn't think Teal was a top rank A+ fighter or anything like that. Askren, that fight right there. I mean, we didn't get a chance to see a whole lot of it to actually know what could have happened. And then the fight with Diaz, who had been on a long layoff coming back into the UFC BMF championship, and then stepping into this title fight with Usman, and it turned out the way it did. Man, the buy rate was awesome. The UFC saw nothing but star quality in someone like Masvidal. But what do you think as far as his star power? Is he going to be bankable going forward? Just for instance, per se, if he lost another fight to someone like Colby Covington.
Brad, how about our guy Booker over here employing some real life revisionist history here? I mean, holy smokes, you just took away all of his accolades. I mean, that wasn't cool, Booker. Here's Jorge.
No, wait a minute.
Darren Till's a bum. Ben Askren's a bum.
No, I didn't. Wait a minute. I didn't say. Wait a minute. I didn't say Till was a bum.
That is some revisionist history.
Wait a minute. With Darren Till, Brad can attest to this. When Darren Till first came on the scene, and he got a shot at the big time against
Woodley in Dallas.
Tyron Woodley. I said I do not think Darren Till is that caliber fighter. But what I did say is Darren Till got a country behind him. We got a lot of people that's going to pay to see him.
Yeah.
And then Ben Askren stepped into the scene. You know, he had to fight with Robbie Lawler. That fight could have went either way. I mean, literally, Robbie Lawler could have won that fight. And then Nate Diaz stepping in off a 3-year layoff. I'm not taking anything away.
Don't forget, he beat Pettis in August of that year. Remember? He beat Pettis. He had just fought 2 months prior. But bro, I thought you were a Jorge Masvidal guy. I can't believe this.
No, I am.
I'm going to call Gilbert right now and tell him about what you're doing.
I'm looking at this from a journalistic perspective.
I'm
just wondering, what do you think? If he was to fight someone like a Colby Covington.
Hey, I'm just working you. I'm just working the worker, right?
Do you think that Ascension, man, would burn out a little bit if something like that was to happen?
Look, it was a tough spot for him because, of course, he took the fight on short notice. And I just kind of wish that they would have done the deal with him. He would have got a proper training camp. He didn't have to cut 22 pounds. I'm not trying to offer excuses because he's not offering any excuses. But there was a part of me watching that later on in the fight. I was like, man, he's clearly gassed out. I just wish we could have gotten a proper training camp so that afterwards we don't have to talk about immediate rematch, this or that. Because if that fight would have gone exactly the same way, with a full training camp, no one would be asking for an immediate rematch, and people would laugh at him for suggesting it because it was fairly one-sided, right? 4-1 or 5-0 if you didn't give him the first round. So what I would like to see happen is this. I would like to see him fight Nathan Diaz in a rematch. The first fight ended unceremoniously. It's supposed to be a BMF championship and it ends via doctor stoppage. I mean, it's like the most un-BMF thing to ever happen, right? So let's run that one back. Let's see who's the man. They're both coming off losses now. And I just think it's the perfect time for that. I would love to see Usman take some time off because he said he wants to take some time off. He just fought, so it's not like he's going to jump right back in there. And I personally feel, and I'm getting in all kinds of trouble for saying this, I don't know why, but Leon Edwards should fight Gilbert Burns. And I'm not even saying Leon Edwards should leapfrog Gilbert Burns. I'm just saying they should fight each other to determine who's the number one contender. You got one guy who's won 8 in a row, who was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley in March. Woodley and well, that whole card got canceled because of the pandemic, right? So in comes Gilbert Burns, who lives in America, who fights Woodley in May, beats Woodley, and now he's saying he's the number one guy. I'm going to fight. The guy who is saying that I will fight anyone, anytime, anywhere is now saying I'm going to sit on the sidelines and wait for the champion. Well, wait a second. What about the guy who's won 8 in a row to your 6 in a row, overall 4 in a row as a welterweight? Why don't you just fight each other in the meantime in September or so and determine who's the number one contender? I don't know why that's such a crazy idea, but I kind of like it. Woodley Covington, I would love to see that happen. They're in talks to make it happen. Hopefully it does happen. Masvidal Diaz, Wonder Boy Maya, I would love to see that fight. I'm just booking the whole welterweight division for you guys here.
Booked the whole pay-per-view.
I would personally like, though, Usman Burns, Edwards and Masvidal. I think Edwards and Masvidal is a really compelling thing, and they had their whole little skirmish back.
Absolutely, I'm down with that. But why does Burns get over on Edwards? Why does he jump him?
He already had a number one contender shot, right? And it went away. I mean, he had the title. I mean,
Burns pretty much. I think Burns steps in just because.
Why? He beat Woodley, who was supposed to fight Edwards, but it was taken away from Edwards because of the pandemic.
I get you,
but still, like I say, I think he stepped in there. I think he stepped in there just because he was the guy who beat the guy, as well as he's the guy that's hungry right now. He's the guy that everybody want to see exactly what he has. But me personally, I'm still wondering, what does Gilbert Burns really have? How good is Gilbert Burns really? We still, that's a question mark still for me there, because I really don't feel like Tyron Woodley was, at his peak in that fight. I just don't. That's just me saying that. Listen, let's move on. As far as, a lot of guys in the UFC right now, a lot of guys are talking about money. We saw, just a couple of weeks ago in the post fight, Maurice Green literally broke down talking about, I needed this tonight, man. I need to put this food on the table. I'm the only breadwinner in the family. When you see guys like that talking like that, when it comes down to, just money, what do you think it is as far as why aren't guys getting that dollar figure that they think they're deserving of in the UFC?
Well, it's a very complex issue. I think the lower end guys are. I think the guys who enter the UFC are getting paid more than any other MMA promotion. Typically your introductory purse is 12 and 12, meaning 12 to show and 12 to win. And I don't think that you get that in any other promotion. I think it's really the top, 10% or so that have an issue because they feel like, hey, like Masvidal, for example, like he was right. Like Masvidal's point was proven. People are buying these pay-per-views to watch me fight. I deserve a bigger piece of the pie. I deserve to have a bigger say. I deserve to get something closer to what a big-time boxer is getting, right? You start to see all these numbers that the boxers are getting. And I think Conor deserves a lot of credit for opening people's eyes. People don't want to give Conor credit, but I think once he came in there and started talking the way he talked and negotiating the way he negotiated, a lot of other fighters were like, well, wait a second. Yeah, you're right. I should be getting more. I should be getting a bigger piece of the pie. But here's the ultimate issue. Like when people talk about, why don't they come together, union, all that stuff. The ultimate issue is this. There's like 3-tier of UFC fighter. There's the top percent, right? Like the Conor Khabibs of the world who kind of made it at this point and they're just happy making their money because they've been working and grinding their whole lives to get to that point. Then there's the guys who are like, the Cormier, John Jones guys who are making good, Stipe Miocic, those guys who are making good money and pretty content where they're at, but they would like, deep down they would like a little more, but they've kind of made it as well to a degree. Then you have the contenders who feel like they're on the verge of making it, right? They're on the verge of fighting for the belt. They're on the verge of cashing in. So they're not going to really rock the boat. And then you have the introductory guys that I talk about, and they're definitely not going to say anything because they're just happy to be there. They just got signed. And so no one wants to come together. No one wants to have a united front. I mean, even look now, Masvidal was talking, he got what he wanted and he got, he returned. John Jones, if he got what he wanted, he would return as well. They were all talking about different things. They all had different issues. And so I would be very surprised that, people kept asking me like, oh, is there a movement going on? Is there something going on here? No, they're all just talking about their own issues. And that's fine. I'm not trying to hate on them for that. I'm not begrudging them at all. But I'm just saying like, there's no concerted effort to come together to fix things. Like they just signed this new uniform deal, right? They don't have a say in any of that. There's no collective bargaining. There's no revenue sharing. There's none of that. So, I thought at the beginning of this pandemic, maybe this was the time, but now that it's off and running and you see the numbers, right? Like the pay-per-views, the ratings, they're doing great. You could argue that, more people are watching the UFC now than ever. But there's nothing going on behind the scenes. I can assure you of that. So, I personally am in favor of the fighters making more. I wish they made more. I think that they should make a boatload of it. And I understand the promotion is obviously, footing a lot of the bill and they're taking the risk by putting on the event, but there's no event if there's no fighters. Right. And so, and the window is very small. Dana White himself said, what did he say very recently? This isn't a career. It's an opportunity. It's an experience. Right. That's even more reason to pay them more, in my opinion.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brett.
No, you mentioned a couple guys there. Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic. They're going to be fighting. The trilogy fights coming up. I know DC's your guy. Y'all do the show together every Monday. That's your boy. But how do you see that fight playing out? Because I mean, what a tale of two fights that we had really in the first and the second. Stipe getting that championship back. How do you see the third one playing out? And what's Daniel Cormier's swan song?
Yeah, wow, what a fight! It's going to be fascinating. People forget. The beginning of the first fight was actually going Stipe's way before he got caught. And of course, we remember the beginning of the second fight was going very much Daniel's way. And I think he got away from his bread and butter, his wrestling, and started to fall in love with the striking. And then, of course, got exposed and was, hit to the body repeatedly. And that was the beginning of the end. So I think it's like, if it stays standing, it's Stipe's fight. If it goes to the ground, this is a classic wrestler versus striker. I would like to think for Daniel's sake, because this is the swan song, because this fight is so important for him, because he wants to go out with a win, he's going to stick to his bread and butter. In fact, he said it as much on our show. He said, I hope Stipe brings his wrestling shoes because, I'm going to wrestle him. And if it's for Stipe working on his wrestling, keeps the fight standing. And if it remains standing, it will be very much in his favor. So I kind of feel like it's like, if you told me right now, hey, I've seen the fight, and it was primarily on the ground, I would tell, DC won the belt. Oh, and if you say, I saw the fight and it stayed on the feet, I'll be like, Stipe retained his title. So I feel like it's kind of dry. The question will be like, who will be able to exert his will, right? Like, will DC be able to take him to the ground, which he had great success with early on? Stipe keep the fight standing, which he had success with. So I can't wait for it. It's going to be fascinating watching it in the smaller cage, if in fact it remains at the Apex. You know, there's been some issues in Nevada. Yeah, so I hope that doesn't get any worse and that they can have the fight in Las Vegas. I think the smaller cage probably favors the wrestler, Daniel Cormier, because there's less room to maneuver, less room to hide. But yeah, a lot of pressure on DC's shoulders to go out like this, and certainly a lot of pressure on Stipe's to win the trilogy. So I can't wait. It's going to be great theater.
You see how he just skated over that?
What?
He gave no answers.
What?
He gave
no answers. What do you want? Why are you hating me? What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say?
Gave no answers right there.
I gave you the answer.
You should be a politician, man.
I said, if the fight stays standing, it's Stipe's fight. If it goes to the ground, it's DC. What more do you want from me?
I want definitive. That's what I want.
You want a prediction?
Yes.
Listen. This has nothing to do with DC. You could ask me about a prediction for the Darren Till Whitaker fight. I don't make predictions, guys. You know why? Because MMA fighters, as tough as they are the most sensitive individuals in the world. You pick against them, they won't talk to you ever again. They will not talk to you. They will say, "How dare you pick against me?" Trust me, this is a fact. So you know what? I'm not going there.
I understand.
Right?
I understand.
You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
These guys are so sensitive. It's happened. I used to make picks all the time, and then people are like, "No, I'm not talking to you anymore." I'm like, "Why?" You picked against me 3 fights ago. What? This isn't
tell
worth
you.
it.
You just answered a lot of questions for me, and I'm gonna tell you, you just taught me something at the same time. I would never be saying anything about Jorge Masvidal ever again
exactly.
on camera.
Because he won't come back on your show. These guys are sensitive, man. You gotta know how to play the game. Man. You know what I mean?
I got you, man. You just gave me some game right there, man. I appreciate that. They say the game should be sold, not told, but I appreciate the little tip.
Hey, a wise man once told me, "Don't hate the player.
Hate the game."
There you go.
Hey, man. Ariel won it, man. I appreciate you stepping inside the Hall of Fame as always, man. Anytime we can get you back in, anytime you got anything going on, let us know. We definitely love to promote it. And again, man, much love. Keep doing what you do.
Thank you, guys. Same to you. Booker, congratulations on the anniversary a couple of weeks ago when you made history. That was awesome. I remember watching that as a youngster. Brad, congrats on the book. It's awesome. I just showed my kids all 3 Back to the Futures. We had a little watch party, and they loved it as well. I'm going to show them the book as well very soon. So thank you for having me, guys. Keep up the great work, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.